Are the probate laws in Florida different or unusual than some of the other states?
Um,
And these pool companies, there are many out there to talk to, but they're not always financially secure. So what happens when we sign a contract with a pool company and say they don't perform? What are our remedies there? When you're reviewing some of these contracts, what specifics are you looking for? Attorneys are required for the closing of a real estate transaction. Is that true here in Florida? Hello, this is George Latos for Love SRQ and Be Local. And today we're talking to attorney Paul Grivas. And we're going to be asking Paul some of the top questions that new and recent residents have on their mind about living in this part of Southwest Florida and about real estate in particular. So I want to welcome Paul. Paul, welcome here. Let's get right in it. So, Paul, in some states, attorneys are required for the closing of a real estate transaction. Is that true here in Florida?
Actually, it's not, George. Florida Bar worked with the realtors to create contracts and things that work well, but I highly recommend you confer with an attorney beforehand just to make sure you understand what you're signing off on, because it is the greatest purchase you'll probably make in your lifetime. But you do not technically need to have an attorney available at closing like other states require.
Okay. So some of us who are out here already have purchased real estate, and we know some of these contracts, certainly with pre-existing homes and also with new construction homes, some of those contracts are pretty lengthy. And not being attorneys ourselves, sometimes it's very beneficial, especially today as some of the new builders are putting in escalation clauses because of the supply chains issues that they had, where initially they would determine costs of different materials, lumber, flooring, things of that nature. And by the time they're ready, they're at increased higher price. So Paul, tell us a little bit about,
I do look at things like escalation clauses to see if there's a potential ceiling on them. Usually they're not. So I have to remind clients that, do you have enough money available to actually make the payments in the event these products, go up significantly in price, double price. During COVID and after COVID, it was routinely common for aluminum for roofing, for a number of other materials to literally be double, sometimes more than that in price. And you have a budget in mind, and then you're scrambling to have the funds to get them. You need to kind of look for remedies in the case things get delayed. Do you have any kind of opportunity to cancel the contract if somebody doesn't file a permit for 6 months or a year or something like that? Sometimes there's liquidated damages you can ask for. Usually the builders won't put them in there, but if they don't get a project done in a certain time, you can always ask for an addendum or something to add that on there. But I always watch anything that's going to impact the bottom line. Like you mentioned, escalation clauses. That's what I try to look out for, and I just try to figure out when things are going to happen for my clients. Are they okay with the timeline? Are they okay with the cost?
I also wanted to bring up a lot of builders are offering pools. Some builders don't offer pools, but people who are building new homes typically want to build a pool. And today a pool can cost certainly over $100,000, in some cases $200,000. And these pool companies, there are many out there to talk to, but they're not always financially secure. So what happens when we sign a contract with a pool company and say they don't perform? What are our remedies there?
It depends on the circumstances. Usually if they've taken your security deposit and they haven't done any work towards it, you can, after a period of time, demand your security deposit back. I always advise people, if they're going to contract with a pool company, make sure that they actually exist. Go on sunbiz.org, look up the name of the company, see if they exist. Demand to see a copy of their insurance. There's a lot of people that can get injured on the job at these pool sites, and if they're not insured or they're underinsured, you're potentially liable. So I always kind of make sure you know who you're dealing with beforehand.
Well, some of you that are out there thinking about working with a builder and a new construction home, the builder is going to require all of this information be forthcoming for the HOA in order to get that approval. However, that doesn't mean that the company itself is reputable. So maybe in a case like this, it's probably not a bad idea to have an attorney review the contract and just do a little bit more of that due diligence before you sign that contract for over $100,000. Let's say, for argument's sake, you are actually in a new construction situation and there are some issues with the builder, and you've talked to the local general contractor who's in charge of your particular build, and it's going on and you're not really seeing the kind of response that you'd like to have, and you don't think things are moving in the right direction. What can we do at that point, Paul?
If it gets to the point where you're afraid you're not going to be able to have a place to live, if you've made arrangements, or if you're just concerned, you can always have a demand letter drawn up. I'll be happy to do it. I'm sure no shortage of other attorneys will be willing to do it. We're basically saying, okay, what's going on? Are you in any way able to meet the guidelines, to justify the next progress payment? That's where it becomes really challenging. They'll demand a progress payment. You go like, wait, there's no progress. You haven't done enough yet to justify this. Are we going to have a house to live in? And yet you're wanting more money. You have every right to, demand, proof of the work that's been done. Demand proof of payment to subcontractors, so the subcontractors don't potentially have a lien on your property. And worst comes to worst, get an attorney involved, maybe have them write a demand letter. It's never pleasant, but sometimes they have to have the fear of God in them, knowing that they could, this could result in litigation if they don't do what they say they're going to do, and leave you hanging.
I think one of the things, that's a very important point, because many of the people that are coming here are coming from out of state, and they do have relationships with professional services that they can call on. But it's always more effective to have a local attorney write that letter, because then they know that this is something that's actionable or could potentially actionable here in the state of Florida. So let's move over a little bit to just general property rights. So there are property rights in Florida that are perhaps maybe a little different than some of the property rights elsewhere that newcomers should pay attention to.
Absolutely. A lot of places that are more landlocked, they probably don't deal with issues related to what are called riparian rights, rights to access to the water if you own property along a waterway. The state technically owns virtually all the submerged lands in Florida, but you still would have a right potentially to build a dock, to build some other kind of structure so you have access to the water from your property. And you definitely want to know if you happen to be adjacent to a waterway, what your rights are to access of that water. Some facilities, some places like, homeowner associations, they really limit the riparian rights. It's just a catchment. It's not considered a body of water as far as they're concerned, so you can't necessarily build a dock on it. It's good to know what you can and can't do with your property before you buy it.
That's very important, because some people come out with a dream that they're going to live by the coast or live by the water and build their dream home. And then they find out that there are a lot of restrictions on what they can and can't do. So again, it's probably very, very important to find somebody who's knowledgeable with respect to operating here and certainly building along the coast.
Absolutely.
So there's a question that I have that's always a little bit confusing. People ask this question all the time. What is homestead? And how do I benefit from homestead?
Homestead is a bundle of rights that you're provided in most states to some extent. Florida's, I think, are more robust. Homestead rights basically protect family members that would inherit the property. They protect you from creditors that are not related to that property. Sorry, you still have to pay your taxes, you still have to pay your mortgage and all of that. It allows you to protect your home from other claims by other people not related to your property. So that's very important. Also, with the homestead exemption, you save a small fortune on your taxes. It limits how much your assessed value of your home can go up. It limits to 3% per year. And also, you have a part that's going to be exempt from taxation. So you can save a small fortune on taxes. If you buy a property, you need to make sure, and then you're going to make it your homestead, you have to provide proof that that is your residence. Usually people use their driver's license address and their voter's ID. But they can go to your property appraiser in your home county and in many cases do these online. But you have to do it by March 1st of the year after you acquire the property, otherwise you don't get it.
That's really important information right there, folks. Okay, I've got an estate plan and a will in my home state. Do I need to create a new plan when I move to Florida?
Not necessarily. Good attorneys like myself, I consider myself a good attorney, are happy to review what you have existing right now free of charge. And in many cases, what you have is still considered valid in Florida. We are a state full of transients, and we understand that people may have made plans in another state. One thing I would advise people that if you do have a will out of state, make sure, and I'll be happy to look over your wills for you, make sure that there is a self-proving affidavit for the witnesses, that a notary notarize the signatures of the witnesses, not just of yourself, because otherwise they may have to come down to Florida to the clerk and testify in court that you did do this will, they remember you doing it, and to the best of their knowledge it was your last will. If you had it done 20 years ago up in Buffalo, the witnesses may not be capable to come down on your passing and do that. But in general, we do honor other states' wills, but I'll be happy to look it over for you free of charge.
Okay. What if I want to make changes to the will?
I always recommend, when it comes to wills, I always recommend a new will. People can do what's called a codicil. It's kind of like an attachment to the will. It's just one of those things where it's easy for, if, say that codicil leaves somebody out, if that person happens to be the one to acquire the will first, that codicil may magically disappear. So I always recommend, if you're thinking about changing your will, start fresh, do a new will. Most attorneys try to make them affordable. I usually charge $300 for a will. It just makes sense rather than just piggybacking a piece of paper on the back end and hoping it's there when the time comes.
Well, this is good advice because, we're coming to a new state and we're starting fresh. We have different assets. The assets need to be changed if we have a will. So it probably is a good time to reconsider what's in that will. But what about my estate plan itself? What if I want to make changes to the estate plan? Do I have to rewrite the entire plan?
Not necessarily. By estate plan, if you mean a trust, it's very easy to make a trust amendment, not very time consuming, not very expensive, where you're just saying, maybe change your designations of beneficiaries along with it, but put some language in there saying that the trust is now located in Florida, in Manatee County, Sarasota County, what county of Florida, and that you understand that there's any confusion between Florida law, particularly homestead law, and the trust, Florida law will dictate, and then the rest of the trust will be deemed valid.
Are the probate laws in Florida different or unusual than some of the other states?
Probate laws in Florida, in some ways, are a little more generous in terms of who can be personal representative. A lot of states require you to be a resident of that state. When my father passed, I could not be his personal representative because I was not a resident of the state of Wisconsin. Florida does allow for family or a resident to be the personal representative. There are some wonderful things that Florida has that aren't necessarily probate law per se, but you can avoid probate. You can do what's called an enhanced life estate deed, commonly called a ladybird deed. It's kind of like, if you've ever heard of a POD, a payable on death on your bank account, it's kind of like that for your home. And it's a great way to avoid probate without a trust. I am happy to write a trust for you if you insist on one, but you may not need it. And that's a very nice thing, and we're blessed to have that here in Florida.
Good information. Many of us are coming to Florida because they want a new life, and some of us want to start a new business. So the question then becomes, do I need a business lawyer to start a new corporation in the state of Florida?
You do not. I think it's advisable to have a business attorney. Florida has a very handy setup for creating businesses, creating LLCs, creating corporations. It's called sunbiz.org. It's the Florida Division of Corporations, and it's very easy to set up a business. However, if you're partnering up with people and you want to have arrangements made so you understand the ground rules of your business, in case things don't always work out as swimmingly as you think, that's where an attorney comes in. You can write your bylaws, you can write your articles of organization for your business, for your LLC, and that way, when things don't work out, you have a plan. It also allows you, if you have a family business, to avoid probate and make sure the kids, they get the business without having to go through probate. If their ownership is with right of survivorship, it just automatically passes to them. So it's always good to do those kind of planning, make those measures with an attorney. But technically, you don't have to. Just like home, it's not necessarily a good idea. But
so I take it it's probably not a great idea to start a sole proprietorship.
It's not. A sole proprietorship, DBAs, doing business as something. You personally doing business as something without incorporating. No, it does not. It doesn't protect you from anything. So if your business is liable for something, you're personally liable for it. Whereas you have some measure of protection if you incorporate or create an LLC.
So this is probably the toughest question I'm going to ask. Paul, what would you tell a younger version of Paul Grivas about first starting out here in Southwest Florida?
I would probably say, don't turn down any potential opportunities. In a million years, I didn't think I'd be doing this. I never thought I'd be a lawyer. I hate lawyers for the most part. I've come to meet some very nice people that are lawyers, but I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing. And I never thought I'd be practicing the areas of law I am. And I consider myself blessed to have met great people like yourself and your wife and any number of other people that I wouldn't have met but for doing this.
So what do you love most about living in this part of Southwest Florida?
I love the nature. I love the water. I love getting out boating, fishing, kayaking with the kids when I get a chance. This is a little scary about going on the kayak, but just love getting out there and enjoying things. Every place else, 6 months out of the year, you're cooped in, you're cooped up, you're waiting for everything to thaw out. it's, you know, there's always something to do any time of year, and we're just blessed to have all this on our doorstep.
That's great. Tell us a little bit about your practice. So if there are other questions out there and people want to get a hold of you, tell us a little bit about the practice and what's the best way to get a hold of you.
Absolutely. You can always look at our website, 941law.com. We strive to help people protect what's theirs. We do estate planning, real estate, probate, handling the matters when you lose a loved one, intellectual property, any kind of ideas for your business, a trademark, an invention, and just basic business law. Just try to help people get things set up and protect what they've put their blood, sweat, and tears into. Our offices are in downtown Bradenton in the Antiques District, just east of downtown on State Road 64. The website's 941law.com. Our office line is 941-251-6030. And like I said, just east of downtown on State Road 64.
Well, Paul, thank you for sharing some really important information that I know are on the minds of a lot of people who are thinking about coming, and a lot of people who are already here, some of the new residents, and it was great information. This is George Lato signing off until our next series interviews. Take a look at Be Local. It's attached here down below in a link. It's free. It's great information about living in the part of Southwest Florida. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, George.